Hello, everyone. My name is Harmony Rhodes, and I am a program associate here at the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. I'm from Detroit and now currently living downriver. I lead the education and youth portfolio, and a big part of my work is in partnership with our Youth Advisory Committee, also known as YAC. Our YAC was started in 1991 with a $1 million grant from the Kellogg Foundation. Today, I'll be talking to two YAC members who lead incredible efforts within youth philanthropy. Welcome, Gracie and Akilah. Please introduce yourselves.
All right, I can go first. My name is Gracie Grady. I'm 16. I am a junior at Mercy High School. This is my second year on YAC, and I really like it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Akilah Malipudi. I'm a high school senior from Farmington High School in Farmington Hills, Michigan. I'm 17. I use she, her pronouns, and this is my second year on YAC, and I absolutely love it, like Gracie said.
Awesome. Thank you for those lovely introductions. So, we have some big news. Can either of you talk about what did we do for racial justice?
I can quickly start off and Gracie can pick up, but we recognize that the racial divide in our country and especially in our community was very, very prevalent, and especially youth, they wanted to do something about it. And a big issue with, youth wanting to do work is that we need a lot of funding to do so. So we wanted to expand our grant to include projects that demonstrate both youth leadership as well as bridging the divide and really working towards easing the racial tensions within our country and in our community. And so that was a really big project that we worked on, and we had a lot of really great responses.
Awesome. And the final grant slate, this was one of the biggest slates that you all awarded in YAC history. The total was 125,000. Where are those grants going, and are there any that stand out for you?
So this year especially, we worked really hard to make sure that almost all of our grants were going towards organizations that are working for racial justice and working on racial issues. So one of the ones that stood out to me is called Congress of Communities, and this one is a youth racial group, and what they're focusing on is helping identify the problems in different communities and pairing up adults and teens to work together to target these issues.
That's amazing. And it's all youth-led work, correct?
So everything that we give money, everything that we fund, we make sure one of the things that we look at is that they have a large portion of what's running their event is all youth. So that no matter what, there's always youth getting a spot in all of these different organizations.
Yeah, and the fact that youth and youth voice is such a priority is so necessary. And why is supporting racial equity, racial justice, and youth leadership important to do as a youth leadership collective?
I think it's really important because one of the biggest things, especially with the YAC, we always look for people who are doing youth work and helping build young people's leadership skills, and not really just hey, we're going to give money for a program that doesn't really, that's for youth but not youth leadership. So we want to fund programs that actually help develop students' leadership, and especially with this grant and when we focused on racial equity and equality, that we're starting to educate and put into the community the funds and resources to both educate and uplift our community and kind of bridge that divide that is there.
Yeah, I can add to that. I also think that it's really important that no matter what we do, that the youth is always at the forefront of leading these things, because, in a few years, it'll be us that has to make, the big picture decisions. And I think it's really important to let the youth lead some of the smaller decisions and some of the bigger decisions now, so that the community looks the way that we want it to. And when it's time for us to help the youth that comes after us, we know how to do it. And that youth is always making decisions for their community, because we're also part of the community. We have to live here. And so, yeah.
To add on to that, a lot of adults, especially those in decision-making spaces, are per se advocating for youth, but aren't consulting with youth. or not having youth in those places of power where they can, advise and guide adults who have that power to make decisions. And I think that's what's really special about YAC, because our council and our group, we have that sole power and ability to grant money, where like large amounts of money to projects and organizations that we feel have the best, abilities for youth to do the best work. And because we are youth, we know what our peers are looking for, and starting to build those kind of skills at a young age will better prepare us, as Gracie said, for the future, because we are the leaders, we are the next generation. So, building that foundation earlier on.
And that next generation that you talk about, you're rock stars and you're leaders, and that the proof and your intention about how you're making adult allies really intentionally work with youth, to complement the work and to be a support, but not really take over, in driving that social change is so important. And so traditionally in pre-COVID, the YAC convened in a very different way. Then you all completed grant review quickly before year end. Normally, what is involved in the process in reviewing quickly, but then also just reviewing and making recommendations to the board under normal circumstances?
I think the grant making process, or like the grant approval process, is so much fun, because the way we usually structure is we get the grants ahead of time, make our own notes, read them through, and then we have like a 2-hour session, sometimes even more, where we kind of collaborate with each other, read grants together, kind of bounce ideas back in like smaller groups, and then take those smaller group ideas and then have a full roundtable discussion where we start to look at grants, what we like, what we don't like. We have our chart that we use. Our chart is like I forgot what it's called, but like that chart really helps us stay focused and stay, on the straight and narrow, figure out what we want. Because I know there are many times where there are so many really cool grants, but they don't really follow youth leadership. They're more youth work. And so our chart is our best friend, but it focuses strictly on collaboration. And then we usually like sticky notes, we put up things on the walls, and we slowly start like the elimination process. And then, we provide feedback. Occasionally we'll do interviews depending on the year. We couldn't do too many because of COVID, but it's a really big collaborative process, and we like to work together, bounce ideas off of each other, because we are a big council. We are lots of different youth with lots of different perspectives. So it's a really big collaborative, unified process of working together and working with our peers. And a lot of dialogue and mediation happens in these spaces.
Yeah. So like normally sometimes it could take like 3 or 4 meetings before we even like got down to like the final few that we were thinking of. Like, because as she was saying, like we would look at them beforehand, and then we would make our own decisions. And then when we got to the meeting, we would do like even like we would read them over again, and then we'd like chart them. And then sometimes like you read a grant and like automatically you think it's a no, but then other people think like automatically it's a yes and they love it. So you have to like compromise, and like sometimes yeah, it's like that's really difficult. And like we break out into groups and we'll go over them that way, and then like we go through the chart, and then like at the end of that meeting, like sometimes we'll only have gotten through like 3, and then like oftentimes we think like that we need to do a site visit or like a meeting with some of the people in charge of that organization just to get like more clarity. Or sometimes we'll send people away and we'll be like, we love this idea, but we need like more clarity. Just like overall, like redo your application and come back, and we'd love to fund you, but it just doesn't look like great. So it can take like months before we get down to like our final few. And then even after that, we have more like site visits, and we have to talk to more people before we can get to like our final choices.
You all lead a very complex process. I know in COVID, we're receiving 2 to 3 times more additional requests than we normally would within a cycle. And you all are feeling the impacts of that within your grant review too. And so thank you for highlighting and just providing insights into your process. And so last but not least, we mentioned COVID, and you all had to adapt to so many different things very quickly to make this special grant initiative happen. So what did you learn throughout this process?
So definitely like one of the things that I learned is how to like quickly compromise, like especially when you're not in the same space as somebody, that can be hard because like when you're like just going through a screen, sometimes like you can't fully express how you're feeling about something. And when it's like such a big decision, that can be difficult. And also like having to look through so many grants, like because we got a lot this year. So there were a lot to look through. And like often when we would look through them, we would look through them before a meeting. So you have to make sure like you write down all of your questions and make sure that you can get clarity during the meeting. And there was just a lot more that we were trying to do because we used to have like 2 hour meetings and now it's more like 1 hour because it's a lot harder to stay focused when like you're on a screen. You can't get up and like walk around and go to the bathroom in between. So there was a lot more that we were doing on our own as opposed to together. And that was like something that we had to really quickly adapt to.
Thank you, Gracie. And you all did it so well. You were a well-oiled machine in the synergy and working together, which I was really just like pleased and excited to see.
Yeah, communication and adaptability were the most important lessons that we've learned through this process. And I remember there was a call with a couple of us. It was like me, Gracie, Claire, and Miriam, and I think Jesse. And we all hopped on a call. This was with Bridget, of course. And we were just talking about hashing out things that like we wanted to talk about. And this was like right when COVID hit. We turned everything online. And we talked about how we want to talk about racial equity, and then we also talked about journalism, and like we, along with Bridget, we made it happen. Like we're having these we had this full grant where we did the new guidelines with racial justice, and then now we're also doing like a journalism thing with Michigan State University. So really learning how to communicate how we feel, as well as how we like review grants and what we expect, was something really important because, as Gracie said, we got a lot of grants because there's a lot of funding that needs to be happened because COVID really impacted after school spaces and people economically, and making sure students still have those kind of opportunities. And B, we have so much time on our hands. What are we going to do? There's a need for programs to happen. So learning how to communicate as well as being flexible, because we would have quite long meetings, and like having them online is even more difficult. Like sitting through a 1 hour meeting feels as hard as like 8 hours of like school. Like it's really, really difficult. But I think being positive and learning how to adapt and communicate how we feel is something that we all really learn, and now we're kind of experts at it, if I say so myself. But it was a great learning curve, and I think it'll make us better leaders and better people in the future.
I love that you all had such positive learnings walking away from your experience. And it's not even necessarily walking away, because we're just now getting into the work within the awards, which is truly really exciting and responsive to all of the issues that's currently going on within our community. Gracie, Akilah, thank you both so much for talking with us today and for all of the work that you do. If you would like to learn more about these grants with the Youth Advisory Committee at the Community Foundation, head to cfsem.org/YAC.